We aren't retreating, we're just advancing in another direction. That's what I'm branding this little expedition. It's becoming more clear to Isaac and I that the anomalies that descended upon the chasm out the state are growing more and more untamable by our current means. Sure, we could constantly dump thousands of rounds into the beings that lurk outside of the walls, but what about the ones that lurk within them? The entities that seem to be tampering with the machines that we're using. The ones that showed me that they can easily rip apart electrified wires that I trust to protect the land. We need someone who can aid us in this. Someone who's skilled in identifying the paranormal, and who, hopefully, will have the means to stop it. And I know from one of the local sources, an herbalist named Roseanne ran a shop on the far side of town. So, we loaded up the SUV, brought Isaac along with a duffel bag of his he called his necessities. I swear to God I saw something moving inside of it. John brought an overnight bag. I closed the trunk of the SUV, and my eyes centered on the 3 cases in the back of the SUV. The sound of the door shutting snapped me back to reality. It's time to go. I hopped in the driver's seat and started the engine, which, after a moment, finally roared and kicked to start. I looked at Isaac. He was ragged, mangy, and the bottom of his eye socket was bandaged all to hell. But he was alright. Sitting there, glazed over eyes and a beer in hand. The gate started to open. I checked the car's GPS, trying to see where in town this Roseanne shop was. Isaac chimed in. What the fuck is that? I felt this dread overcome me as I gazed up from the small screen. I looked up, and in the center of the driveway was a wheelchair, sitting right up facing the gate, dead center of the driveway. Should I run it over? I asked Isaac, who just took a swig of his beer. John peeked over the seat this time. What if it's a trap? Indeed, what if it is? I unbuckled my seatbelt, the sound of it sliding back as I opened the door, stepping outside. I walked up to it. As I did, something else became clear. The chair was surrounded by various articles of clothing. Children's clothing. Bonnets, raincoats, shoes, a dirty jack-o'-lantern bucket. All of them looked like they were dipped into a peat bog, surrounded by this shiny, clean leather. I walked around to the front of the car and approached it. The crunching of the gravel was white noise as I approached. The sound grew louder and louder. The gravel underneath my feet was almost deafening as I stepped. Then it hit me when I was 3 feet away from the thing. It's noon, early October. The fauna is still green and cool, and the only thing I can hear is my footsteps and the sound of the car behind me. Not a sound coming from the forest. Not a bird, not a cricket, not a squirrel. Nothing. I was no longer a security guard, warden of the land I was patrolling. I was a small man in unfriendly territory. I stared down at the chair, angry from all this bullshit. I grabbed it and heaved it leftward. It cracked off of a tree before rolling onto the grass lopsided. Then I stared at the clothing. Why? No, actually fucking why? Why this? Why these kids? Why any of this? Just then, I heard a snap. My soldier instincts kicked in as a tree branch pierced the dead silence in the air to my 8 o'clock. Front right of the gate, I drew my pistol and aimed. Nothing. Still trees, grass. Nothing. This is private property, I yelled out, my voice the only sound audible. Then my front left. I could hear an exhale. I spun, pistol aimed. Nothing. Okay, so the chair was bait. But who said it? I looked back to the gate. Nothing could get in. Surely I'd see it. Hey! My fucking soul jumped out of my skin. As I, a grown U.S. Army veteran, proceeded to leap left as a voice sounded right next to my ear. I fired right in front of the gate, almost emptying my weapon. The shots went flying through the air. One hit a tree, the other scraped off the wall. And then one nearly missed the metal stand of that motherfucking skeleton. Tim! I shouted at the inanimate object. I did gaze at my pistol. Turns out I was wrong. I did empty the magazine. Narc! I ran my hand down my face, squeezing my temple as I stared up at him. Did he set all of this up? I gazed back at the wheelchair before locking eyes with the empty sockets of this thing. Timothy, what the fu— Before I could finish my sentence, the passenger door of the SUV opened and Isaac came out, peering over the gap. Are you okay? He said in a concerned tone. Well, a little fucking startled. Why the fuck didn't you warn me? I said, more bitter at the sons of fucks just sitting in the car that let that happen than the calcium construct itself. Warn you about what? Isaac said, face and voice drenched in confusion. I was taken aback, my head shaking in disbelief as I extended my hand outwards. That fucking skeleton. What skeleton? My eyes shot across from where he was. Nothing. Nothing there. Nothing but a small pile of bullet castings. I was shocked. I looked through the windshield at John, who had his headphones in, just playing on his phone. You okay? Are you drunk? Isaac called out. The forest around us still quiet? Yeah, just get in the car. The drive to town was fairly uneventful. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, expecting some sort of beast to finally say fuck it and charge the car. Finally ready to end this charade. But it never happened. We reached the end of the dirt road. Isaac had found a Sharpie, and was quietly drawing a skull and crossbones on his damaged eye. There. He tossed the marker aggressively back into the glove compartment. Now I'm a goddamn pirate. He's got the alcohol problem to be one, I thought. As I turned onto the main road, I peered back at John. John, we're going to drop you off at your friend's house, just like last time. Is that cool? He shrugged. That's when Isaac chimed in, spinning around in his chair to meet John with his good eye. Hey kid. The trucker rested his chin on the headrest, crossing his arms over the back seat. How you holding up with all this? I looked back to see John pause whatever he was playing, pulling out his earbuds. I mean, it depends. How should I handle this? John spun one of his earbuds in a circle by the cord. Well, ghouls living outside your house and ghosts living in them. Well, we don't know if it's a ghost yet, I slipped in. Though the two of you probably could write me a college seminar on why I'm wrong. Shut up, skeptic. Anyway, Isaac held one of his hands out towards John. Look, I know it's going to seem odd with your dad leaving just a minute ago, but Dwight and I will keep you safe. Do you understand? John then snickered. I know. You guys did buy enough guns to take over the town. That was not a good impression. I pried one of my hands from the steering wheel, scratching the back of my neck. Yeah, I said, feeling a bit guilty. We did flash a ton of ordnance in front of the kid, whether the situation warranted it or not. They're in good hands, John. Isaac grabbed my shoulder with his fist. Hell yeah, self-defense only, bud. And with ghouls, it's always self-defense. What I didn't mention, though, and I dare not mention, was that Isaac almost mowed down a group of hikers when we were clearing the trail of debris just a few weeks ago. We pulled up to the little town, exactly as it had been since we last stopped in it. A light mist from the mountains had traveled down, hanging over the town. A salt mill, smoke pouring out of the distance, the bar, neon lights flashing in the windows. And yet, not a goddamn person out on the street. We came to a stop at an intersection, the armored-up Toyota slowing to a halt at a deserted crosswalk. I dropped my hand to the middle compartment to my right, leaving one hand on the steering wheel, tapping my fingers in anticipation for the moment the light would just turn green. But it didn't arrive quick enough. Me and my part-time trucker friend gazed around. John's fingers were tapping away on his tablet. Along with the hum of the engine, it created kind of an ambient white noise. I waited, expecting anyone to come around the corner, but it never happened. The mist from the rainy season created a kind of distant wall that the streets just blended into, and yet silence and desertion was all that occupied it. I looked up. The light was still red. I looked around, looked at John, still typing, looked at Isaac. His eye was still bandaged, but it had some pus leaking out of the bottom. Then back to the light, still red. I'd say if this were nighttime, we'd be getting jumped, but we both know the shit around here ain't afraid of hitting us during the day, Isaac said, uncapping the last of his bottle, as he took yet another swig. I don't know if he's using it as a pain reliever or a confidence booster, but it ultimately failed last night during our basement adventures. But regardless, he did seem to have an endless supply. My fingers tapped on the leather-lined steering wheel. Isaac finally finished off the small bottle. Then he pulled out a flask from his back pocket. Why am I not surprised? My eyes darted around the deserted streets. The milky gray and white mist wall obscured what lied behind it. I swear, I don't know if it was eye floaters or what, but I saw movement just behind the mist, just out of the corner of my eye. My eye snapped up to the light. Green. I'm pretty sure I nearly floored the pedal as I peeled out of the stoplight. I pulled the SUV up to the front of the house, same as last time. John gathered up his belongings and shoved them into a pull-cord backpack. He waved to us as he hurried up the sidewalk to the house. I cleared my throat. I was feeling dry, parched. Last time we came here, the town felt eerie, but it had some semblance of, not sanctuary, but controlled chaos. Now, it felt like I was dropping John off right in the middle of the goddamn woods. Across the street, the fish-eyed neighbor stood, watching him as he trundled up the steps to the house, then at us. He held a pair of hedge clippers and chopped mindlessly at a poor bush in front of him. So much so that when he finally stopped, he nearly gutted it by cutting the stem in half. Then he just dragged the clippers up the sidewalk as he shuffled up the stairs, sliding into his house. What a charming fellow, Isaac said. Charming, sure. We arrived at the western end of town, right before the big stone bridge that crossed an even bigger river. It was mostly a suburban area. Actually, with a town this rural, is there anything even suburban? Roseanne's herbalist shop was seemingly built into her house, like those personal businesses some might build in the middle of a neighborhood. The entrance was at the back. Isaac and I pulled into the driveway and walked towards the house. Isaac tossed his flask back into the car, and then pulled out another one as we walked up the asphalt path. I swear to God he's gonna kill his liver at this rate. The smell of violets, herbs, and essence pierced the stale air of the fall around us. Hanging from the side of the house was a stained glass sign reading, Roseanne Solutions, in red letters and a dark purple skull icon, with a multitude of what I think were maybe feathers, like floating around it. Huh, Isaac and I said as we both stared at it. That's comforting. I shut the car off, stepping out into the cold air. We approached the back entrance. Isaac joined me. So, he said, stretching out his words, going to a witch's hut on the edge of town. Tell me, do you think she praises Cthulhu or Satan? Had this been weeks earlier, I would have decided against approaching what Isaac said was a witch's house. But this wasn't weeks earlier. We were down options, rounds, and a good eye. I knocked on the door 3 times. The paint was chipped, showing lack of maintenance, and her house was, grown in. Large hedges, trees, plants, vegetables, all seemingly defiant to the autumn air around it. And yet, they were all neatly groomed and maintained. This would be any botanist's wet dream. Isaac balanced himself on the wooden banister of the porch, scratching at the edge of his eye. Pus leaked out again, black and green in nature, against my previous hopes. Don't do that, I cautioned. Why? He said, shoulder slumped. It's probably fucked like that for good anyways. He sounded far more defeated than usual. And I felt guilty. If I had been quick... I mean, on the bright side, I guess he will get used to that eye patch, right? Sorry, again, not the time. My hand beat on the old wooden door of the building again. Irritated this time. Roseanne, I called out. I looked at the schedule taped to the door. Roseanne Solutions, whenever the stars align, I will be at your aid. Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Friday to Saturday, 24 hours. Sunday, midnight. Kind of, odd hours, but Isaac said. He grabbed the rock and tossed it at the door, which bounced off with a large thud. Roseanne, open the hell up. Suddenly, the door shot wide open, the sound of heavy wind emanating from within. The door missed my face by nearly an inch. Maybe. While I stumbled back, the suddenness caused poor Isaac to topple back into the hedge, head first. I walked over to the banister. You all right? I called out. Isaac's hand rose from the bush like a submarine periscope, giving a thumbs up. He painstakingly crawled his way out. I gazed at the front door, the dim entranceway, cluttered with chests and plants that greeted us, and yet no one in sight to have opened the door. My insertion was correct. This was definitely a voodoo house. As we entered the building, a strange toxic smell grew. Lavenders, cherries, and freshly cut soap. And remember when I said cluttered? Isaac and I would like to say we're not particularly husky, but this place, we had to squeeze between trees and large boxes in order to get through. Finally, we reached a red velvet curtain, a piece of notebook paper pinned to it. The inner sanctum. Isaac looked at me. I looked at Isaac. Then I leaned into the curtain. Roseanne? Go away, a female voice said from behind the curtain. We're closed. We, I thought. Isaac chirped up. Hey lady, listen, it's Friday. You said you were open all day today, now open up. There was silence for a few seconds, and then the candles and weak lights around us flickered. No. Frustration welled up inside of me. I had finally had enough. I threw open the curtain and charged in, Isaac right behind me. As we entered, it was a makeshift laboratory. What looked like a living room was layered in plants head to toe, ceiling to floor, and a large table with pipes, glasses, tubes, burners, and strange liquids. Through the ambient light of the candles and burners, I saw her. She stood back, hospital scrubs and a lab coat with a wool poncho over her shoulders, and a beanie covering her tan skin, long dark hair, and she stared daggers into Isaac and I. Does no mean yes where you come from? Get out, she said. The candles around us flickered again. You're the only person in town I heard who can help us, I argued, though it did very little to quell her rage. And why should I help you? Everyone in this town has problems, and everyone comes to me. And just because two scruffy-faced men burst in, that means I must help you? She said as she slammed a glass vial down, hard, and it, surprisingly in retrospect, didn't shatter. Lady, our problems aren't like the rest of the town's. Remember that black gunk from the engine, sealed in a Ziploc bag? Make that 2 bags. I held it up. Her eyes squinted, then widened. As she held out her hand, I tossed it across the table. She caught it and began inspecting. Where did you... she said in disbelief, almost like she had prior knowledge of whatever the fuck it was. Casamouth Estate. Oh. She dropped the bag of black gunk on the table. I'm sorry, but whatever's happening there is far out of my range. Why? Isaac bellowed out. Just weirdos out in the woods, batshit phantoms, paintings that cut my fucking eye out. You do the whole flickering light shtick, and yet you're too afraid to come help us? What makes it so weird from the rest of the town? You took the words right out of my mouth, my redneck Cyclops friend. Roseanne crossed her arms. Before Casamouth, Theodore, is that his name? I nodded. Before he arrived, the woods were strange, but they contained to the deepest reaches, the recesses we would never journey to. However, I don't know what happened, but him building his property there riled up something. And now even the town itself has been suffering. Her hand shot to her chin as she looked at the bag. As vaguely cryptic as that might be, Roseanne, I shoved my hands into my pockets. Our compound, a marvel of several $1 million in custom hardware, was breached. Not from the woods, but from the inside. It took down nearly all of our fancy defenses. And, like Isaac said, it took his eye with it. Roseanne looked over to Isaac and his gauzed-up, bandaged eye. He smiled through his beard, giving her a thumbs up. She looked at me in the eyes. I believe we understood each other. Or at least, she believed what I was saying. I would, but like I said, everyone in this town needs help, and I'm just one person. We got a custom battle wagon parked outside. Baby can hit 80 miles an hour despite being armored up like a tank. We'll give you a lift, Isaac said, offering up my car. Well, technically Theodore's, but he left it for me. And I wasn't in the mood to argue ownership right now. She looked at me. You do that? I mean, I shrugged. If it'll get the ball rolling, let's get your errands done. She laughed. Errands, yeah. She held up a hand, slapping the other one across her arm. All right, let's do this. And that's how it happened. The engine is running now. Our professional witch doctor is inside collecting her things. And Isaac's taking a leak in front of her house. Jesus, dude. Roseanne said she only had a handful of calls that need to be answered right this second, and then we'll head back to the estate. I don't know how the cell service is across the town, but it's been pretty spotty today. Strangely, it wasn't like this a few weeks ago before the mist. Might just be a waterlogged cell tower. Regardless, I'll update as soon as possible. This is the head chief and still sole member of the Kazimoth Estate Security Force, Dwight Nolan, signing out for now. I would like to thank all of the lovely patrons currently listed on screen right now. Dan R. Chaos X, JY Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A, Daniel H, Maximilian Charles P, Go Cute Puppy, LLC, Young Sykes, Dark Side of the Bear. Guys, thank you all so much. And like I said before, I'm having issues with Patreon and getting notified. So if you are a patron and you're not listed, please send me a message.